Hello, Mage fans, and welcome to Mage the podcast that works hard towards ascension so you don't have to. Today on Tomes of Magic, we're going to be looking at World of Darkness Sorcerer, a book I'm certainly looking forward to. And I am joined today by Terry Robinson. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that starting out. Before we open it up and really start talking about the book, I think it's a good time to go to announcements.
And I've got some. First announcement, join us, discord.me/magethepodcast. We have a lot of hopping discussions going on there. One of our community members, Eustace, recently published a Mage 5th edition conversion guide and is feeling out the community like, hey, if you want to port a mage into a 5th edition vampire game, maybe here's a way to do it. And that person is looking for feedback, so hop on there if you've got opinions. That's all I got to say. Let's talk about Sorcerer. Whee!
Okay. Well, in Tomes of Magic, we're starting off today talking about World of Darkness Sorcerer. This is, technically, I would say it is a mage book, even though it was released under the World of Darkness line. World of Darkness is, of course, the setting where the 5 big games, Vampire, Werewolf, Changeling, Wraith, and Mage take place. But it was also made as a sort of imprint for source books that work with the rule set shared by those 5 games, but don't particularly have to connect to one of those games. And so Sorcerer was released as a supplement that you could connect to Vampire, Changeling, etc. as you like. But it does appropriately dovetail with what's going on in Mage the Ascension. And that is why on the back cover there is a purple mage logo right at the center bottom. So this book clocks in at about 130-something pages, maybe 135 pages, and put out in 1997. The authors were James Estes and Soteros Brocato, who was publishing at that time under the name of Phil Brocato. And I remember a few months back when I was interviewing James Estes, he spoke very warmly of the time that he worked with Brocato. And it gave a very good book for us to talk about.
Yeah, this guy was 2 heaping spoonfuls of fun, at least on my end, not to blow the review that we normally do at the end. The other thing is, I like how you're like, well, it says Mage the Ascension on the back. I like the idea that we go through all the mage books and we run out of, ideas. So we start, photoshopping copies. We just start putting the mage logo on other books. And we're like, Star Wars, Fall of the Empire. Look, it's got a mage logo on the back. Can I see that closer out? No, it's mine. And, that's how we keep this going past 2022. For anyone who's curious, if you go to the Discord, I have our approximate schedule of when we're recording various Tomes of Magic episodes. We've got a bunch of requests. Hey, when are you going to cover that? That will give you an approximate idea, and you can see the estimated date and the order in which we are going. So once again, go to the Discord because I am shamelessly promoting the thing that I use to distract myself from doing my actual job. So,
well, before we get a walkthrough of the book, I thought this would be a great time to start out with the core concept of this book. In the World of Darkness, we have something called Numina. It is a game term, and no, it is not a disease you can pick up in an Atlantic City casino, although I have to admit it does sound like one. Numina is a class of powers that is supposed to be weaker, lower down on the power scale than, say, vampire disciplines or werewolf gifts or true sphere magic. They are powers that any regular person can learn or, as the case may be, born with it. So they are supposed to be available to the standard mortal, someone who does not have by blood a connection to changelings or werewolves. They have not awakened. They have not been embraced by any scary thing in an alleyway in the World of Darkness. Just regular sorts of people. They fall into 3 rough classes. There's psionics, like telekinesis, telepathy, things along those lines. There's what they call path magic. That is also called hedge magic. These are magical powers that any mortal, any normal human being can learn if they study a lot and they have a lot of dedication. They don't have to awaken. And the final group is called True Faith. And True Faith is a special class of power. I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Say, Terry, the 5th edition Mage book. I mean, that's probably going to come out at some point, right?
Probably. It is definitely going to come out if I have to drive to Sweden. I specifically said drive to Sweden and make sure it is produced myself.
So you know that's coming out.
I know, with the surety that the sun will rise tomorrow.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a good example of true faith. Terry has true faith in Mage 5th edition. And if I were to do something that got in the way of that belief, if I were to oppose that, he would find deep within him the strength to turn, that is to make me flee, or to make me very sorry that I said that. So rather than test that, I'm just going to say that this is an excellent example of true faith.
I like the way you presented there, that true faith and brawl can be used interchangeably. Like, I'll make you wish you hadn't said it, damn boy.
During the second edition days of Mage, there were a number of different books put out that emphasized different ones of these. Project Twilight was sort of loosely connected to the werewolf line, and that talked about psionics. There was Inquisition, that was sort of loosely connected to the vampire line, and that had more information on true faith. And World of Darkness Sorcerer takes path magic, also called hedge magic, and really gets into detail there. Now, some mage fans would say, hey, we've got Ascension's Right Hand, and that had path magic in there that we can use. I mean, why do we need this? Well, for two reasons. One, it revises the rules. It makes it a little bit stronger so that player characters' experience points go farther when purchasing path magic. And also, there are new paths presented here. So now that we know what the book is basically talking about, I would like to hear a walkthrough from Terry.
I will walk the heck out of this book through for you. That was in no way a grammatical sentence. I have two notes. One, if nothing else, Project Twilight is amazing because it contains the single greatest in-world artifact in the World of Darkness, and that is Bob Schnoeblen's Pyramid of Satanic Power, which if you have never seen is absolutely sublime. The other note is if you're looking for a more contemporary version, all of these have been revised and updated in Hunters Hunted 2, which coincidentally also contains a copy of Bob Schnoeblen's Pyramid of Satanic Power, trademarked. So, this book starts out with an introduction, so to the surprise of no one. And the introduction is a simple outlining of, hey, mages, you think you're the bee's knees, but there are other mages, also confusingly called mages, that are also doing magic out there. And they may be referred to as sorcerers, they may be magicians, they may be wizards, and it goes through what all these terms mean. And sometimes they're called hedge wizards, and sometimes they're called linear mages, a whole bunch of different names. But they start out and they say, hey, there are 4 things you need to know about sorcerers. First, hedge magic is limited. You have a path because you can't deviate from it. There are certain things you can do. There's very little room for improvisation. Item number 2, the paths are not subject to paradox, which is pretty great, not going to lie. Third, magicians generally do not participate in the Ascension War. Fourth, most sorcerers have cultural identity, meaning these powers and abilities are very much tied to a worldview. They are not generic. It's not like doing Pilates or jazzercise or something. It is not context-free. And they suggest that the reason that linear magic works as a loophole in reality is that these things have been used for so long that they've kind of made their way into the subconscious, or people have figured out some rule of reality they didn't know. And the 5th of the 4 things that you need to know, because I didn't count the number of bullet points initially, is that sorcerers often form societies. Few people study or perfect on its own. And then it gives you some recommendations on how to use it, followed by one of my favorite things in 2nd edition, a legal disclaimer necessitated by stupid people. And if you're cool with that, we move on. So I thought it was a pretty efficient introduction. Did you have any thoughts on that, John Adam?
I have always appreciated how the writers use game terms and sometimes capital letters to sort of help a person who's new to the game to like work through a large amount of text. And we all know that mages are called by many different names, but when we're reading through mage books, it says mage, mages, we know, okay, these are the people who use sphere magic. And in this book, they say, in this introduction, they say, we've got magicians, we've got mages. Magicians use path magic, mages use sphere magic, and of course, they themselves use a lot of different words. The world's a confusing place, but look, you're reading a game book and let's make it clear. And it's like, yeah, I appreciate that. That is actually very helpful.
Going into chapter 1, it's a general overview of what the life of a linear mage is going to be like, or a practitioner of one of these paths is going to be like. And there are certain elements that kind of hit common beats. In this section, it very much felt like this was a James Estes section because it's talking about like a universal myth and commonalities in the human experience. And it talks initially starting that there is something always forbidden about the arts that are being practiced, in the sense that while you can get to them with study and reflection and work and community connection, there is also generally this other way of attracting power, sometimes called the black path or a black art. They also contrast the 2 types of magic that are done and how there tend to be gender associations with it, that men generally do high ritual magic or shamanic practices, and the common arts, mediumship, fertility, brewing, herbalism, and weathercraft, tend to be attuned to women. Which I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. Never really thought about that. They talk about how initially most people feel some sort of call. The idea that there is something else out there. This may be internal, it may be external, it may be an experience where someone comes across something, that the magicians have special access to something, and often by their culture are considered to be doing something sacred. and that generally there are three different reasons that people pursue linear magic. One is the call of the ancient, the idea that those before me have done this, I am part of this lineage, I wish to perpetuate this. It is some sort of knowledge that comes down from an age that in some way was more enlightened that we have lost contact with. The second idea is that it's hidden, and hidden things tend to be valuable. And these are the people that like cracking secrets and solving puzzles and dealing with conundrums and so on and so forth, and points out the idea that the occult comes from occluded, that which is being concealed. Likewise with the word arcane. And finally, those who try and seek power. This doesn't necessarily mean strong personal power. It could be something to improve your community, but also talks about how the pimply-maged heavy metal teenager worshiping Satan wants power over the fact that they don't really have control over their lives, and their parents say they have to be in bed by 10. Finally, we get a list of steps that most people go through. One is as the starving student, where you suddenly realize that there's something else out there. You try and sift through a whole bunch of information and fail, and that you eventually discover the community or some mentor makes themselves present, and you realize, hey, I need to unlearn a bunch of stuff and relearn a bunch of different stuff. At the adept level, you are connected to a community, and that there is probably no apex of power, that you will be learning forever if this is really something you want to understand truly. And then finally, you have mastery, which can take literally decades. They also talk about how once one discovers that magic is out there, it is impossible to go back, that one cannot unlearn these things. And in many cases, your interaction with linear magic has awakened your presence to the spirit world, and the spirits will not unnotice you. And there are a few final reminders that are like, hey, mages out there, some things to remember. Linear mages are not necessarily a member of the craft. They are not trying to hunt us down. Sometimes they are our allies. They are not our servitors. Magic, theirs too, is constrained by reality. And finally, that their magic is real. They perform magic in the same way we do, not necessarily in the same form, and it doesn't accrue paradox, but they too have the ability to change reality in profound ways. And that draws us to the end of chapter 1.
I appreciated how the chapter helped me to see how mages see magicians and how that is different from how magicians see themselves. And to kind of spell that out and give some examples was very helpful for me as a storyteller. So I certainly appreciated that.
Then we get chapter 2, and this is a big honking serving of the societies in it. Our expert when it comes to knowing mage groups and their relationships with the outside world is one Adam P. Simpson. I don't actually know what your middle initial is, so do you want to take it away?
Yeah, certainly. Chapter 2 gives us more detailed write-ups on 5 magician groups and shorter, more brief write-ups on 6 more magician groups. And what was really interesting about this book was this is the first time that it introduced hedge wizard factions or hedge wizard groups to us. Before, when we had seen Path Magic and this option in mage books and even other World of Darkness books, it was as individuals, like your character can learn these magics and do these things. And so my friends and I had always thought of them as being solitaries, people who studied on their own, learned on their own. And so this book said, no, most of them are actually belonging to groups, and these groups do a lot of interesting things in the World of Darkness. So it's nice to see that with this book. It mentions that of the factions mentioned, most of them are less than 100. There's several that are less than 50. So most of these groups really are not very large. And I appreciated that all of the write-ups here these magician groups with other factions and other groups. And so it was a lot of fun to read the end of each longer write-up. But first off, we have the Ancient Order of the Aeon Rite, and this group has shades of Order of Hermes, a Western occult group with a focus on Kabbalah, Enochian, numerology, and similar concepts. They hold financial resources and are known for charity work. They claim to be guided by spirits called secret watchers. In magician circles, they have a reputation for being smug and standoffish, but they do not antagonize anyone. Their headquarters are in Amsterdam. We have, I'm going to probably butcher this one, the Balamob. This one has shades of dream speakers, but also verbena. These are primal magicians that use shape-shifting and spirit beliefs from the Mayan culture. They stay in the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras. Mostly poor rural people who know the jungle well. They use bloodletting and believe they protect the common people from harmful spirits in Xibalba. That is the Umbra. They sometimes ally with were-jaguars in the jungle, but these are usually temporary things, not long-standing relationships. Next, we have the Nephite priesthood, also perhaps could be pronounced the Nephite priesthood. I don't have the final word on that. This one is Shades of Celestial Chorus. These are called the Dust Prophets. This male-only group belongs to the traditional Mormon faith and believe their line started with Nephi hundreds of years ago. It was wiped out long ago, but restarted in 1849 when they believe Nephi appeared as an angel to a Mormon to restart the group. They work to protect the Mormon faith. Members often wander alone in the deserts of Oregon, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and Arizona. We have the Thalhun. This one has Shades of Sons of Ether. True believers who teach an alien in energy form has lived on Earth for ages, teaching people enlightened science as magic. In 1961, this alien life form took on human form and trained 7 disciples in the undisguised alien science. Now they study an alien language and its difficult harmonics as they try to build machines that channel sound for advanced effects. Headquartered in San Francisco, and they are a peaceful group. Finally, for the long write-ups, we have I'm going to pronounce this, Uzoma, traditional African priests who follow spirits called Orisha. Spirit possession is an important part of their magical practice. They sacrifice animals and use music and dance in their rituals. They serve their African communities as priests and teach traditional ways. They protect their communities from outside dangers, more men than women, but not exclusive. Mostly in Nigeria, Togo, and Benin, but some have come to the New World, United States, Jamaica, and Colombia. In the brief descriptions, we have the Asatru Futhark, a rebellious group that has adapted parts of Norse magic together with demonic pacts and harsh black metal music. They hold many racist views and have a special hatred for Christianity and the modern society they blame for making people soft. They initiate violence and are avoided by more serious practitioners of Norse magic. Dozen priests of the Pythian order, descendants of an ancient order of Greek formal poets, probably only a half dozen left. They keep a temple on a small island off the coast of Greece. Their poems incorporate numerology, ancient music, astrology, etc. The Fenian, followers of Irish Celtic magic, and claim to be members of an ancient, undiluted bloodline. They believe their powers are more from their blood than study. Each member lives under a different geisha they cannot break. They value strength and singing ability, less than 30 today. They have allies among the Fianna tribe of werewolves and changelings, but enemies among the Fomori, which are given more detail in the werewolf source books. They often learn animal shapeshifting. We have the Mogenhakav, Kabbalists who only accept men over 40, centered in Brooklyn, New York, believe they must locate and protect the 36 righteous individuals scattered across the globe. They create accurate horoscopes and promote traditional Jewish culture. We have the Seven Thunders, a Christian group that uses the true faith merit quite a bit. Members of this group are anti-establishment and oppose scholarship along with traditional church authority. They started in the Renaissance, faded quickly, but reestablished in 1992. And of course, they claim a direct connection to their founding. And finally, we have the Zolondroder, dreamers of the Silver Portal. These are dream magicians. They study a translation of an ancient scroll that teaches about oneromancy and dream realms. They search for this mythical city of Siranon. And that is our 11 groups from the book, and that wraps up Chapter 2.
That was a toasty walkthrough, and as I think Adam's quick review points out, like, they jam a lot in there. You got 11 groups to play with, and given hours and days of research, I'd come up with like 2.5, and they'd be pretty lame. You've got everything from like worshippers of star people, which is pretty great because, spoiler alert, the Thalhun come back later, which I think is pretty great. I think one of the weirder choices was that to be a member of the Nephite priesthood, you had to have a charisma of at least 18 and had to have your alignment set to lawful good. Also at level 4, you got a horse. So that was kind of interesting. But on the plus side, you get to cast priest spells. So that was pretty great. Oh, no, shit. I'm thinking of the Paladin class from Dungeons & Dragons, which I couldn't stop thinking about the entire time I was reading about the Nephites. But I think my favorite part of the section, hands down, though, is the opening conversation between the Uzoma Babalawo and a Hermetic, where the Uzoma is where the Hermetic is like, I've had this guy over a bunch of times, but he refuses to understand true wisdom. And the Uzoma is like, I've been over this dickbag's house a bunch of times, and he keeps talking to me about this bullshit I don't care about. And I'm like, yes, this is mage in its purest.
Estes nailed that well. He did a lot of good writing in this book. It was a lot of fun to read.
And my final two favorite things about the section are some of the artistry. The art that goes with the Star Council member, or alternatively the Thal Hun member, is just this person with long hair with a shirt that says "The truth's out there," just obviously spouting off, just with their head bent, being like, anyway, so the coolest thing about Kuvan's technology is it's based on resin. And like just looking at it, you're like, I don't want to talk to this person. I hope I never run into them at a dinner party. And then the final illustration of the section is one of the most World of Darkness 1990 images I've ever seen. It's a person wearing very dark glasses who is likely inside wearing a short sleeve leather. I'm not entirely sure what it is, with a lot of Egyptian stuff and guns. And very precisely done hair, and possibly a choker of some sort. I can't quite make it out.
Lots of expensive tattoos.
Lots of very expensive tattoos, or very crappy tattoos. Like either way, it's not a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. It's a 1 or it's a 10. And I'm just like, man, I miss 1997. But yeah, a lot of good groups, a lot of interesting things, great history to work your way through. So on to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is character creation, and it walks you through a comical number of World of Darkness entity types, where it's like, can a sorcerer become a mummy? Probably not. Can a sorcerer become a true mage? Yes, but they lose it. Can they be a kinfolk? Yes. Can a kinfolk become a sorcerer? No. Can a wraith become a sorcerer? No. Can a sorcerer become a wraith? Kind of, but it's really rare. Can true mages learn linear magic? No. Can vampires learn this? No. Stop trying to make a cane bro. And it just goes through it in remarkable detail.
Yeah. Well, one point on that.
Shoot.
That section was good, but I thought it was cool how they say in the book that you would naturally think that because this is a weaker kind of magic that mages could do that too if they wanted to, but no, they look down on that. But it says that mages actually cannot do path magic or hedge magic, because if they try, their avatar automatically translates it into sphere magic. So it's like they actually cannot do it. They can observe it, they can hang out with them, can't do it.
I prefer to think that your avatar starts acting like a really nagging ex-boyfriend or girlfriend and being like, oh, I'm not good enough for you. You're spending time with that hussy linear magic. I say, see what happens next time you need true magic. They add, additionally, a number of abilities which are interesting. Like, we get a whole bunch of new traits. We get new backgrounds and so on. We get new archetypes, which is kind of cool. Like if you want to be a crackerjack and regain willpower when you do something impressively difficult, it's in here. If you want to be a sage or a sensualist or a theorist, it's in there. We also get new talents like dreamcraft and fortune telling, which is kind of weird to me because I'm always thrown off when like a talent gives you a specific skill. We also have hearth wisdom, which is your familiarity with folklore. And one of the ones that kind of threw me off is like lore supernatural creatures, where it's like, well, there's a whole bunch of other lores. So we're going to have this lore collapse down into this one lore for simplicity's sake. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you had metaphysics, where it's like, no, you can't just have metaphysics. You get metaphysics sacred geometry or metaphysics numerology or something like that. And it's like, one of the weirder ones for me is they introduce arcane as something that a regular mortal can have. And I go wildly back and forth on whether that should be a thing. Like, I kind of like the idea of mages dealing with someone who they think is a mage because they're hard to remember and he's blurry in all their high school reunion photos or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here because I was thinking the same thing as I was reading this. It says that they can have the awareness, I think it's ability, I just call them skills, but they can have the awareness skill and they can have the arcane background. And I was reading through this, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to get upset if a storyteller wants to run with that. I can understand that, but I would not do that because I think there is a difference between mages and magicians, and so I wouldn't use arcane and awareness for magicians in my games, but yeah, I certainly wouldn't complain if other people did it. But yeah, there's a number of skills in here that are interesting. There's also a number of skills in here that I just wouldn't have in my game. I would tell my players, no, just leave that one alone. And boy, howdy, are there a lot of merits and flaws in here.
And some of them are pretty simple, like you're a light sleeper. And other ones are, the one I never got is why shape changer kin is a merit. Like, why would you pay points to have to be at the beck and call of a member of the Garu and have to take care of the fact that they are not willing to raise their children and often financially profligate and leave a wake of destruction behind them wherever they go? To me, that's a flaw. Just putting that out there. Like, sure, there's that 1 in 100 chance. Like, hey, when my cousin from out of town comes in, he's going to mess you up for dinging my car. But yeah, most of the time it's paying someone else's cable bill, making sure that the cairn is properly maintained, and like cleaning up after a 9-foot tall murder machine. Not a merit to me. That's just me, though.
Yeah, not exactly merit material.
Yeah, and likewise, apparently mortals can get echoes, which to me was always a super magey thing. But hey, it's here. Isolated upbringing and offensive to animals. I always like that. Offensive to animals, whenever I see that, I'm like, I just picture someone who is constantly wearing fur coats. That is the way that manifests inside game. But once we get through that section, I guess the next thing is the paths. And this is your standard 2e fare. Like, if you really want to min-max, you can sure as heck do it, where you take Path Inept in something that you're never going to take, and you get a 5-point flaw, which gives you a bunch of points to get Path Adept, and then you pick low in values and then spread it out and make it cheaper and so on and so forth. So, yeah, you may want to revise the value for that. But it's all here, and it gives you a bunch of stuff to play with, even if there's little individual bits that you might want to change. Okay, Chapter 4 is the potatoes portion to Adam's meat portion of the meat and potatoes of this book. And here we go through the different paths. And first it starts out with what I think is a printing error, because this section says tools of the trade, but I actually think this is the 4 or 5 pages of incredibly detailed and well thought out information on focuses that should have been in the 2e core rulebook. So the 2e core rulebook was very tight, very condensed. They had to cut page count wherever they could. This is much more leisurely and walks through not only the symbol and tools and what they're associated with, but also the why, where it talks about, oh, this fluid is associated with this thing for this reason among this culture, which is why you want to use it in this effect. And I'm like, oh man, the 2e core rulebook would have made a lot more sense to me when I was like 12 and reading it for the first time if we had access to those. So even for that alone, just the detailed walkthrough of ritual tools and other implements and their symbology and so on, I thought was super cool. They talk about some systematic stuff regarding using the paths, the individual types of the spheres, as it were, of sorcery, and how casting works, that generally it's going to be attribute plus a ritual requirement or a intelligent plus occult. It varies per thing. How difficulty is calculated, usually the highest level of the path involved plus 4. How quickly someone can do this. One of the things that is heavily reinforced throughout the book is nothing in here is generally happening off the cuff. Nothing here is happening instantly unless it's otherwise noted. A level 5 summoning is going to take 5 turns, and it's even slower for certain things. Like if you're doing an alchemical practice, it can take days or weeks per dot. It gives you some recommendations on how to deal with failures and botching, and maybe what partial success is going to look like, how to bring other people into it, which is kind of cool, because this is one of those cases where, much like hunters in Vampire, they're not very powerful alone, but generally they have friends. So if you and all your friends are doing a summoning, even though none of you has more than 2 or 3 dots, in aggregate, you can get a pretty large success pool, which probably means you can summon something powerful enough to murder you and your entire family. So you got that going for you. Get a quick reference table of how to do it, and then we get into the actual paths. And basic paths, we got alchemy, which allows you to make magic items. It's much broader than just transformation. Conjuration, which allows you to pull stuff out of nowhere. Conveyance, which allows you to move stuff from somewhere else, which is somehow different from conjuration. We won't dwell on that. Cursing, which is a lot of fun. That is something that we originally got in, I think, Ascension's Right Hand. Divination, how to tell the future. Gives you a couple ways of doing that, whether it be scrying or cartomancy or casting items or dream interpretation. Enchantment, again, a different kind of talisman making. The power of ephemera, which is kind of the ability to deal with and interface with spirits. And there are some variants of that. Fascination, which lets you bewitch or beguile people. Healing. Hellfire, which actually covers all kind of elemental forms, whether it be an earthquake or a dust storm or my favorite element, trees. You've got herbalism and brewing, which allows you to make magical potions and poultices. And then we get to shadow, which you think is going to be awesome. You're like, obtenebration is a badass power. I loved the Hellraiser movies where the guy just has chains and claws come out of the shadows and rip up a guy, and you look through it and you realize it is absolutely nothing like that. It is remarkably lame compared to what you think it's going to be. It still is systematically useful. Just get ready for some letdown there. We also get shape-shifting, and then finally a variant on ephemera, or kind of a different thing, which is summoning, binding, and warding. We also get like a demonic version of that, or a daimonic, which I just kind of pronounce as demonic or something like that. And then finally, we get Weathercraft. And this is a lot of fun. Each one of these paths has a lot of meat to it. It gives you a bunch of recommendations, but they're not really, to me, internally consistent. Like 3 dots of Hellfire and a lot of planning, you are as dangerous as somebody with a slingshot. And in terms of experience costs, I'd much rather put those into dots of firearms. I understand that you can probably get your wand through airport security better, but maybe not. Maybe the TSA looks for that stuff these days. I'm not entirely sure. Healing also, if you look system for system, like being a doctor is probably better until you get like to level 4 or level 5 dots, especially because there's a different power that nearly includes all of healing. Like you're like, I have learned healing. I have enchantment, so I made a stone that does it for me. Like, my mere presence makes his disease stop propagating. I'm like, well, this stone does, so I can go to work and still spend time with my kids. And you're like, damn it. Also, there's kind of weird restrictions. My favorite, and I have to get this out before I let Adam talk. 4 dots of shapeshifting. Any normal modern animal that is smaller than an elephant and larger than a mouse, inclusive, you can transform into. And I would like to note for the listener, well, what does not include in the world of mammals? Sure, it rules out like most insects and so on, but I would like to specifically note that until you have 5 dots, you cannot transform into a Etruscan shrew, a pygmy possum, a bumblebee bat, a mouse lemur, or a pygmy gerboa. And I just think that's nerfed. I don't know the number of times where I've been in a game and I could just solve a problem immediately if I could turn into a Etruscan shrew. Otherwise, it's a lot of fun, but I mean, it's World of Darkness. We don't play it because the powers are balanced. We play it because it's super fun. So did any of these powers jump out at you?
Well, let's see, for chapter 4, I also really enjoyed the large page count that they gave to magical tools. I thought that was very appropriate and a lot of fun. I think it's probably more useful to storytellers than it is to players, but very useful to both. A lot of fun to read through. And it not only talked about how they use these tools, but it's like, and here's why. It's like a tool is an extension of one's arm, and it symbolizes this kind of a thing. And milk, comes from here, and so it's appropriate that it would symbolize this sort of thing. And I thought that was really cool. It helped me understand how magicians can use quintessence. I thought that they just absolutely could not. And of course, I got to say, it made sense to me that they can't, because they really aren't mages. They can't naturally sense quintessence like mages can. But it says that only way magicians can use quintessence is if it is in the very strong form of TAS. If it's like got TAS of 4 or 5 points or something like that, maybe 3 points. If it's 1 or 2 points, they don't even know it is TAS. They don't know there's anything special about it. They'll just toss it out. But if they can get some very strong, solid TAS, then they can employ it in a ritual of theirs, and it gives them 1 or 2 more dice to their dice pool, or it reduces difficulty by 1 or 2. And so it's like, okay, I guess this kind of makes sense. They can get a rough feel for it if it's really strong and it's in an actual solid form they can hold in their hand and see, and they get a little bit of benefit from it, but nothing like what a mage can get out of it. Also, I was just as I was reading through this, I was thinking about how ephemera, which lets you see spirits and talk to them, and then as you get stronger with it, you can actually summon them and ask them to do things for you. It has some overlap with summoning. And summoning, of course, there's 2 types: summoning like animals and things in the physical world, like bats or dogs or something. And as it gets up to the level 5, you can summon like werewolves or vampires. But there's another kind of summoning, and that is summoning, I guess, daimonic, and that is spirits, not things from the physical world. And so that overlaps with ephemera. Ephemera is you can summon wraiths and specters, you can summon nature spirits, but stop it there. And with summoning daimonic, you can summon angels, devils, gods, and kind of leaning towards the high umbra, maybe some elementals. And so right there, you can see that anyone reading this book is going to have a really good grasp of the whole world of darkness and where everything is before they can actually make use of this. Because a lot of storytellers are going to read, it's like, well, he's got ephemera and this other guy's got summoning daimonic. I mean, don't they just pull out the same spirits? Like, well, actually, no. If you knew all about the levels of the Umbra and the world of darkness and all that, then you could divvy these up into categories. But a lot of people are just going to be like, I don't know, the spirits. We'll just give them some spirits.
Did you have a favorite item or power listed that you just looked at it and you're like, man, that would be amazing? For me, hands down, 2 dots in alchemy, because at 2 dots, you can create a potion where 1 hour of sleep will get you through a complete night. And right now, I could really use that.
When I was reading through it, I realized Shadows is quite different from the Vampire Discipline of Tenebration. Like, still, I mean, I was reading through it. It's like, even at the lower levels, this is kind of cool. It's like I could see doing some neat stuff in this. And I mean, even if you were to like have it in the real world, I mean, just use it a little. It seems really cool. And then I was reading through this. It's like, this is a very evil devil power, and people sacrifice children for it, and they hunt down people who know this. I'm like, what? Damn it.
Yeah.
That looked like fun.
Level 1 is the equivalent of make it look like something weird's happening kind of out of the corner of someone's eye, but not really that much. And level 2 is like make shadows slightly darker and make light fade a little bit. so you're like,
well, I mean, in the right situations, you could get a little bit of mileage out of it. But also conveyance. I was like reading through conveyance. It's like, oh, it's kind of like teleporting or magical travel. It seems like it could be fun. But like at the first 2 levels, it's like, yeah, but you can't use it. You can just like make objects move, and it's like, yeah, well, that's what we were doing with the other one. And then when it's like levels 3, 4, and 5, it's like, yeah, you can go like a little bit, but it's like really impractical, and you're probably gonna like screw up and like fall out of the sky halfway and end up in someone's spa while they're taking a soak, and it's like, or you crash through the roof into someone's bedroom. It's like, yeah, I could just see players when they're making up sorcerer characters like looking through this like conveyance. Why would I take that?
Yeah, some of the power curves are pretty fascinating. Like, as you mentioned, with conveyance, level 1 is move one small object roughly 10 feet, which to me is the equivalent of like attaching something to a Roomba or a toddler and then just kind of hoping it wanders near you or maybe to a small dog. And you're like, yeah, just get the Roomba and at least it will clear the path of debris between you and it. So I can get that. I don't know if they're coming up with it like, oh man, this is gonna be so cool. You're gonna need the gun. The gun's gonna fly towards you, and then you're gonna say something cool like "lights out for you" when your friend uses their shadow ability or something like that, and then you're gonna use the gun because that's actually more effective than any of the supernatural elements in the scene. It's one of those things where sometimes you look at a power that seems like it's been nerfed, and you're like, what player abused the previous version of this in a way that I am simply not able to understand?
Yeah, you just imagine the playtest reports like, take this out. No, we're leaving it in, but then nerf the hell out of it.
Exactly. 2 of my players died. Not the characters, the players. You need to bring this down. You're like, what happened? And that brings us to Chapter 5. Chapter 5, Solitary Templates. These are character sheets. These are some samples, and just like every other character sheet in the World of Darkness, we get a picture, we get a description, and we get a character sheet. And we have the Antiquarian, we have the Secret Agent Sabrina, we get the Street Prophet, we get the Baby Witch, which is in quotes for reasons I don't fully understand. We get the Hitchhiker, and then we get the Appendix. And these were fine. I thought it was interesting that no one in this section had more than 2 dots of charisma. That's just a weird thing I noticed. And no one had a strength above 3, but that's not too unusual. And it gives you examples of the rituals that they'll have, what their backstory was, and it was fine. The Secret Agent Sabrina, I didn't quite understand, where it's like, you work for the FBI and you're a witch. And I'm like, are you part of like a witch division in the FBI? Or is this just like a hobby, like me saying I'm in the FBI, but I'm also on like a beer league kickball team? I'm not quite sure what the interface was there. Although the section on the Street Prophet had an amazing line where it said, by 25, you were like a whitewashed shack, pretty on the outside, but termite ridden on the inside. Did you have any thoughts on the character sheets?
I think they were interesting. Could be useful for NPCs, but like you, it's like I read through it and it's like, this is fine, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that I didn't get was when it's like, oh, advancing quickly can take decades and years. And then you've got the Hitchhiker who is a teenager and has 4 dots of shape-shifting. And you're like, someone didn't take their own advice. But, who cares? It's still a cool character. So, like, who cares if to break the rules a little bit? Again, it's the World of Darkness. This is for drama club kids, not the mathletes that play D&D. The final section of the book is the appendix, which goes through sorcerers of repute. And it goes through some historical figures, others that have been fabricated, talking about great sorcerers or purported sorcerers, maybe of the Enlightenment. We get another example character from sub-Saharan Africa who is generally carrying around blessings and portents and make sure areas are being well fed and get what they need. We get Gretchen, which is super creepy, which is the idea of a cult participant who is always someone who appears to be no older than 25, is kind of pretty but nothing to write home about, and then just kind of disappears, possibly with weird blood bonds having been attached to her and terrible charms and cultists being left in bodies in her wake. And I'm like, that I can use. I'm pretty glad to see that. And then finally we get relics. This is interesting because as a mage player, I'm not quite sure how to parse these. Like a potion I get, you drink the potion, it does the effect. But you've got something like, for instance, silent feet, which are stealth shoes. How does a mage see them? Are they going to see it with Prime 1? I kind of like the idea that these items are somehow different from wonders or devices that would have their own arete, that there's somehow something else that a mage would look at it and be like, this is different. I'm not quite sure, and it goes through a few examples of those, from a low level to something like the invisibility shoes, to a cup that if you put a bit of blood on it, it automatically turns whatever is in it into poison, which again, it's just simpler to poison someone. It's way easier, or shoot them again. Everyone can have 5 dots in the sphere of gun to solve their problems. And then we have the bibliography. And I initially made fun of the bibliography because it includes a siteography, which are a whole bunch of web pages. And these are peak 1990s websites where it's like http://members.aol.com/snarkana/index.htm. Not even HTML. .htm. When .htm ruled the world. We got an MC&I site. Like, I was really hoping for like a tripod or a GeoCities or an Angel Fire in here somewhere, but sadly we did not get it. And I mocked it, and Adam's like, well, all these things still exist. They're just in different places. And I'm like, you're no fun and also better at this than I am. So what did you think of the appendix, Adam?
I like the Sorcerers of Repute. I thought that it gave some good inspiration, especially it started off with Count Cagliostro and his wife, and talked about how they've made an interesting reputation through history and might still be around somewhere. I thought that was pretty cool. And when it came to the relics, I liked having examples of different relics that could be used. But what was really standing out to me was this theme that occurred through the book, and that was that they make no assumptions about what wizards or magicians are going to be like. It says some groups are really very evil. I mean, they're doing really, really awful things in the middle of the night. And others are, just saintly, noble healers and helpers. And then you've got a lot in the middle who are basically, they keep to themselves, might be a little selfish, but they're not really hurting that much or helping that much. I liked how the relics kind of laid it out. It's like, here's a mask that in order to use it, you have to actually kill people and put blood on it or something and then activate it. And then traditionally it's been used to do really very horrible things. And the next relic we have is like the silent shoes, or their stealth shoes, which are not really good or bad. And after that, you've got the broomstick. And of course, it's got an illustration. So I noticed that before I read the passage, and I thought, oh boy, they had to do a broomstick. And as I was reading through it, it's actually really interesting because it's not harmless, but it's not evil either. It's this relic that will strengthen your libido, it removes your inhibitions, and it doesn't make you do bad things, but it's probably going to make you do things you wish you didn't do. And so I thought that was actually, interesting to see these range of very different relics that are all offered. So that was a lot of fun for me. Made that section mean more to me.
You mentioned something where it just kind of gives you a lot of items without context, which was good because you get to do whatever that makes sense with them. And overall for the book, I think it does a good job with that. By divorcing the path from the implements, it gives you a lot more ways to present seemingly the same thing. Like as you go through the alchemy section, each dot gives you 5 or 6 examples, and some will be culturally appropriate for a particular group and other ones won't be, which is a super good way of doing it. I kind of wish the core rulebook for Mage did that a few times, where it's like, hey, this one effect can be represented 4 or 5 different ways depending on the paradigm, and that's something that this book did, and I thought that was pretty great. I guess overall thoughts, I thought it was good, it was creative, it had a lot of interesting things. You had 2 great authors who are producing the good stuff that we come here for. It does a good job of reminding you what sorcerers are and are not. It gives you a bunch of groups that kind of echo what we would consider to be a tradition and maybe natural allies, but it also is sure to point out, hey, these are places where it'll differ. This is the ecosystem they operate. These are people that are looking after it. It kind of comes in the wake of the Society of Leopold from the Inquisition in Vampire, as well as Technocracy notes, where it's like, hey, what does the Awakened world know about these? And that I thought was also interesting. As Mage goes forward, the importance of unawakened or hedge magic or linear magic acolytes and so on becomes much more important, and this is kind of a foundation stone. I in no way take issue with the fact that there is a Mage logo on the back, considering the quality of the writing and the utility of the contents.
Yeah, this is written with the second edition rule set, and so there might need to be some adaptation if you're using it with Mage 20 or revised, but I recommend the book. I think it's a lot of fun. There's some really solid writing in here. I think both writers were at the top of their game, and I really like all the different factions and groups in Chapter 2. I think they'd be fun to bring into any edition of Mage that you're working with. This got, I guess you might say, a makeover during the revised edition. They put out another Sorcerers book, and they just made it a full-on, Mage cover, and said this is just in the Mage line.
One of the interesting things about the revised one is it includes a fair bit of meta plot in it, where the Desert Paladins stop the world from exploding, and the Star Council has absorbed the Thalhun after something happened with Kuvan, and it kind of advances the world forward and suggests that maybe these groups are interacting more than mages may anticipate, which is kind of interesting. It harmonizes some of the rules. Like, I would really love to see a Sorcerer 20th edition. The only thing that I wish there were also more of, we really don't get any technomantic paths or examples. The closest we kind of get is the Star Council with their weird harmonic shaped things, and the fact that they made this scream powered star car that exploded into a whole bunch of really smooth pebbles, which is a strange detail to include, but I love that stuff, so I'm glad they included it. Maybe a few more varieties of how it could appear, but yeah, I certainly can't complain about it. I thought this was just going to be a slog because a lot of the generic World of Darkness supplements I'm not too keen on, but then I saw this one and I'm like, son of a gun. I made fun of Adam for including this the first time. Glad he did. If you can get it for $4 or $5 on Drive-Thru RPG during a sale or as part of a set, grab it. The only thing that you may have to deal with is the fact that there is a giant baby head on the cover that I'm not entirely sure why it's there. Sure, okay.
Yeah. Just as a Mage fan, I've had problems with this book when I was a teenager, when my mother found the book and said, "What are you reading?" And decades later, I'm in my 40s now. I'm getting ready for the podcast. My wife comes in and picks up the book. "What are you reading?" I'm like, "What, again? Oh, good grief. They have to do this on the cover."
We're gonna have to hollow out like a nudie mag or something. That way, it just looks like you're reading something normal as opposed to these weird RPG books. Be like, "No, honey, it's just porn." I'm like, okay, tell me when your podcast's on. Tell Terry I said hi, or something like that. But the next few covers that we're going to cover are distinctly more pedestrian. Any other overall thoughts there, Adam?
Well, let's see. Just generally speaking, the World of Darkness has always been about multiple layers of conspiracies, and I think that these magician groups works really well into the setting. Now, of course, because they use path magic, they're less powerful. They're really not in any position to be fooling or pushing around mages or were creatures. But just the idea that the first few steps into the shadows, the first few layers of conspiracies, you're going to find magician groups like this, and then to think that if you go a few steps farther, you're going to see that some of these groups are being manipulated by mages or by vampires, and of course some are going to be entirely independent. And I think that's a fun thing to play with in games. As a storyteller, I think it would be interesting to have some mage players encounter these magicians and find out, oh, they're just hedge wizards. Look, they can't even do much. It's like they can't even use their rituals in combat in any way, shape, or form. These guys aren't really a problem. And they start throwing their weight around or really messing with them, and then they find out that there was something else behind that is now upset, that sends more powerful opponents against them. They're like, oh crap, what did we stir up here? That's something I'd like to play with.
And it's certainly one of those things where even if the mage views them as ants, they're still the biggest ant And an ant biting you can still hurt a lot. Like, I think of the section in Syndicate, which we recently did, where they talk about the cleaning crew, and those are mortals just with just a few powers, but like 1 or 2 extra dots of stamina, or the ability to soak lethal damage, or the ability to run a little bit further than the people you're dealing with is all the difference. And I think it's a great example of hubris to be like, oh, these are lay wizards. They know nothing of the true arts. Yeah, except for the fact that they outnumber you, let's say 10 to 1. They can do group rituals. Like, when it comes to flat out summoning, like, a group of mortals can exceed most Spirit 4 mages, just because they're generally going to be working with a lot of people. They have cultural trappings backing them, and they probably did their homework out the wazoo compared to what a mage did. And again, they have access to the sphere of gun. Mortals are never to be trifled with in the system. So,
or four magicians that have cursing, and they all focus on one mage, and it's like, what? I thought they were just hedge wizards, but what is this?
Yeah. Suddenly all your difficulties are increased by 6, and you're botching left and right, and you're gonna have a bad day. So yeah,
definitely. Well, I had a few adventure ideas I wanted to finish up with. Number one. Accounts of theft and destruction at council chantries are being reported. Rumors are circulating of rebellious and disaffected acolytes who are organizing to pursue grievances against their awakened employers. Mages are initially baffled by how the acolytes are succeeding and escaping until it is learned someone is supplying them with talismans so subtle they are difficult to detect. When the players are called to investigate, the trail leads to an enclave of magicians in Boston belonging to the Ancient Order of Aeon Rites. Horizon Chantry wants the rebels' supplier rooted out quickly, but Doisatep does not want the AOAR disturbed. The supplier is a magician receiving the items stolen from chantries. What is he planning, and how does he know so much about the Council of Nine? Number 2, the players find a brilliant opal the size of a goose egg near their ally's node. It's full of contestants that cannot be accessed, and anyone who touches it with bare skin falls into a deep sleep filled with ominous dreams. Clues lead to a small hidden group of occultists calling themselves the Dreamers of the Silver Portal. They practice dream magic, and although not strong enough to pose a threat, they possess another egg-shaped opal. The opals have strong links to the dream realms. Are the Onera of the Dream Realms trying to control nodes on Earth? Are the magicians witless pawns, or do they have plans of their own? Number 3, the players are Arcanum field agents told to investigate a report of a copy of Count Alessandro Cagliostro's Elixir of Life. They infiltrate an order of self-proclaimed wizards called the 10th Seat of Jehovah, who claim the Count is immortal and their current leader. As the players get closer to the elixir, they get drawn into their host's struggle with other magicians, the Brotherhood of St. Hermes. As they help fend off Brotherhood infiltrators, they learn the hidden leader is collecting materials for a great ritual where the elixir will be tested and traitors uncovered. Can the players remain undercover and find the elixir in time? Can they resist the temptation to see the elixir tested? And those are 3 ideas of my own. So I think now that just about brings us to the episode of another episode. Did you have any further thoughts before we conclude?
I have my favorite quote. I already mentioned the by 25 you look like a whitewashed shack, pretty on the outside, but termite ridden on the inside, which I hope to someday describe myself or preferably someone else, because I'd rather not be termite ridden, is the quote during the character creation section of, if in the process of creating a sorcerer character you're trying to decide which group kicks the most ass, you've missed the point of the book. To which I say, no, you've missed the point of the book, Mr. Competent Author James Estes and Satyros Philbricato. This is the era of Vampians. Everyone wants 4 dots of potence, 4 dots of celerity, and access to temporis. That's all I'm saying. We are not here to judge. Also, Adam found those updated links. Those will be in our show notes. We'll also include links to the other sorcerer-like lines and some of the other World of Darkness generic books that we think are going to be useful. Again, if you click on those links and buy them through DriveThruRPG using the link, we get a little bit on the other end, and that helps us keep going. And with that, I'm done. Take us out, Adam.
Well, if you have something to say, please contact us at magethepodcast@gmail.com with your questions, comments, or feedback. Subscribe to Mage the Podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and TuneIn. If you like the show, others might like it too. And if you leave a review of Mage the Podcast, it makes us more visible in their searches. You can follow us on Twitter at Mage the Podcast. We're also on the web at magethepodcast.com. You can listen to past episodes there and see the complete show notes. This episode is thanks to executive producers Ira Grace, Richard Bat Brewster, John Magnuson, Michael Parker, Anders, and Justin. If you would like to become an executive producer for Mage the Podcast, it would help us keep producing episodes. You would also become a part of our own council to discuss upcoming projects. The link in the show notes will get you started. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and until next time, truth until paradox, baby.
Next up, we got Isle of the Mighty. Time for some sweet, sweet changeling action. Bye.